afternoon. This is Simon Stain at the International Labour Conference, Senior Advisor for Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work at the International Labour Organisation, and you're joining us here at the 107th International Labour Conference for a Facebook Live session to mark World Day Against Child Labour and, most important, to mark the 20th anniversary of the Global March Against Child Labour. And with me are three friends, two very old friends and a new friend. Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi, who was the founder of the Global March and still a global leader in the movement against child labour. Basu Rai, who was at the age of 9 the youngest of the children in the Global March that came to Geneva in 1998, and Zulema Lopez from the United States, who was in child labour in agriculture as a child and now is studying labour relations at Michigan State. Basu now an adult child labour activist, and congratulations, a new father. Friends, let's move straight to the questions. Questions will come from the audience as we move on, watching on Facebook Live. Kailash, it is the 20th anniversary of the Global March. The three of us were there when you entered the Assembly Hall of the Palace of Nations here, right behind us, the second Assembly Hall of the United Nations. Thousands of children and adults who have marched across 103 countries across the world, from all the corners of the world, to demand a new convention on the worst forms of child labour. What was it all about? What had made it necessary to organise that extraordinary physical march across the world to come here to where we are today 20 years ago? What was it all about?
Well, I have been working against child labour in my country, India, and then South Asia for many years. Then I realized that the problem cannot be solved in isolation by 1 or 2 or 10 countries. There is a need of global movement against child labour, but also there is a need of an international law, an ILO convention against the worst forms of child labour like slavery, trafficking, use of children in hazardous occupations, and use of children as soldiers, child soldiers, and so on. So we wanted to build a worldwide movement which had a very big speciality, and that is the march should be led by children themselves, former child laborers, survivors, but also the children in schools, colleges, universities. They should come on the streets and demand the end of child labor, and it has happened. When I was walking here today and remembering 20 years ago, I was feeling like the goosebumps in my body. I'm emotional because, as you said, hundreds of children in these corridors were walking with loud slogans, and that was their desperation, that was their moral call, that they no more accept child labor and exploitation. They want education, they want freedom, they want safety. So that was very special. And the world had listened to the voices of children. The ILO Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labor has been unanimously adopted. And then by now, it is almost universally ratified convention, almost. So we are very, very happy. We have been able to build a worldwide movement, global march against child labor, but also we had learned how to work together. The NGOs, trade unions, governments, employers, even the faith groups came together, and they are still working together, and that was very unique, and that is still unique. But a lot has to be achieved. As we all know that the number of child laborers has gone down from 150 or 250 to 260, some say 260 million to 150 million now. So that is a remarkable achievement. But I tell you, Simon, you were marching with us and you were chanting slogans. You were one of them. Today you are ILO officer, but you were the real marchers in your heart. And you are still a marcher in your heart, I know. So you are still marching in your new role in ILO. But we knew that we are not talking about numbers. We are talking about every single child. Yeah. Every single child matters. Every child matters. So we wanted to bring childhood in the lives of every single child. So the march is still on, though the physical march was over after culmination here in this building, but we are marching. And I'm sure that we are going to end child labor.
Well, that's really the big challenge. And you're right, the convention that was adopted in 1999, the following year, is now the most ratified of all the ILO conventions, and no convention's been ratified as quickly. So that was a huge success, and a lot of that is due to the collaboration between the Global March and the ILO's constituents, the governments, the employers' organisations, the trade unions, and of course the trade unions and the NGOs have been really the bedrock of the Global March for these 20 years. But you said, you were talking and saying, look, this is about the voice of children. And we've got two young people here with us, veterans, though they're very young.
True.
Veterans of child labour and veterans of the struggle against child labour. So let me turn to Basu first, if I may, Zulema, because Basu, you were here in 1998. You were 9 years old. You were the youngest of the children chosen to take part in the long physical march across the world. What was your most vivid memory of the march and of arriving here at the ILO in Geneva to make that demand? We want our childhood back. We need a new convention that will protect us against the worst forms of child labour, and we need more protection against all forms of child labour. What's your most vivid memory? And then I want to ask you actually to tell us something about your own memories of child labour and how you got out of child labour. But what about the march itself?
Well, let me start from the beginning, that, from the child labor part. When I was very small, when I rescued from the street of Kathmandu, I didn't know about anything about the rights. There is something about rights of the children exists there. So once I rescued, I was very lucky that I could have a mentor like Mr. Kailas Satyarthi, and I got very good friends across. And then they taught me they told me that you have your rights. You were not meant to do this, all the things. So then I realized, oh, we do have rights. Okay, so I came to know Mr. Kailas Satyarthi ji was organizing this worldwide march, and I didn't know him that time, and I came to know that I was getting selected to become the part of that global march. And then I said, okay, but I would get. Why I wanted to become into the march desperately is I came to understanding that that I have to tell the people who are responsible. So and that global march was giving this thing, and Mr. Kailas ji was giving this platform to us. And then I got selected, and then I met lots of maybe around 16 presidents across the world. I met with Pope John Paul II. Yes, Pope John Paul II, and I was demanding the same thing, that I was when I was 4.5, I ended up in the street of Kathmandu, become the part of the gang, mm-hmm. And then I worked in I baked. I did the bakery. I worked in the domestic. I became the domestic servant. I became the street eatery shops and all. I worked there. I became the meat delivery boy. Lots of things happened, and I had seen that children were having fights, and they were stabbing each other, they were oozing blood out. So then, that I wanted to say to the world that please, if you can stop this, return those children if you can. Make them alive, because I was small, so I could not know that, So I said, please return those childhood which was snatched away, and please, make them alive.
Let me ask you, because I just want to remind people that we're on Facebook Live here at the 107th International Labour Conference in the Palace of the Nations in Geneva. With me are Nobel Peace Prize laureate Kailas Satyarthi, Zulema Lopez from the United States, and Basu Rai from Nepal. We're talking about the 20th anniversary of the Global March Against Child Labour and World Day Against Child Labour. Now, Basu, you were just pointing out that you entered child labour, and really it's some of the worst forms. I think we don't want to create a hierarchy, but the violence of organised begging and work that kids are forced to do in gangs is really appalling, and it continues all over the world. You entered really, really young, and part of the discussion we've been having today is about the fact that a lot of the emphasis in the discussion is going on older children in hazardous work, very visible in global supply chains, but actually children are still entering child labour at the ages of 5, 6, 7. And we talked about the need to turn off the tap. Yeah. And I want to turn to Zulema Kailash just briefly, because Zulema, your experience too also, like Basu, was entering child labour really, really young.
Yeah.
You weren't like 12, 13, 14. You were how old when you started working in the fields in the United States?
So I started working in the fields around the age of 7 is what my mother says. But I feel like it's all I could remember. I feel like I grew up working in the fields. I definitely had it hard, I feel like, but there's definitely people out there who have it worse. Starting to work at the age of 7 years old is not so ideal for the typical child that wants to go to school and meet their friends. I did this from the age of 7 to the age of 18. I stuck through it. I didn't think that I had a future at one point. I felt like I was stuck in the cycle of being in child labor and continuing it for generations. I definitely had to like find myself and find a reason to break the cycle. I mean, a lot of children my age, for instance, I have a younger sister right now, America. Her name's America, by the way. And it is. And she is a 9-year-old right now. And I mean, it's hard for me to say right now, but I know my family takes her to work right now. I know she goes and she wants to go. She wants to go help the family. She wants to be able to. She sees everyone around her doing it and thinks it's normal, when it's really not. And we need to basically make regulations that restrict kids from going in the fields and being able to do that.
Let me ask you though. So I mean, I want to ask you about some of the hazards that you recall as well. What it was like working in the fields, because a lot of people who live comfortable lives sometimes think that child labour in agriculture is a sort of slightly harder version of doing a bit of family gardening, and they think that because they dream of living in the countryside, they think it must be wonderful to work on the farm. Tell us a little bit about, because Basu faced hazards on the streets of Kathmandu, and he's written an autobiography about it, From the Streets of Kathmandu, which I think everybody should try and read. But Zulema, you also face hazards in agriculture.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us some about those hazards, and then let's talk a little bit more about these root cause issues you just alluded to.
So for me, working in agriculture at such a young age, I definitely was very exposed to extreme heat. I was exposed to pesticides that we found on our clothes, on our legs. A lot of the times we worked barefoot because it was more convenient for us to get the crops and whatnot. And that definitely took a toll. Everything was just very difficult.
Well, look, I want to come back. We still don't have any questions coming in from the audience. I'm sure they will come in. Let me remind you, this is Facebook Live from the 107th International Labour Conference here at the Palace of the Nations in Geneva. We're marking the 20th anniversary of the Global March Against Child Labour and World Day Against Child Labour with Kailash Satyarthi, Nobel Peace Laureate, Zulema Lopez from the United States, and Basu Rai from Nepal. We were just talking, Zulema, you were saying, still children in the United States, including in your own family, are still accompanying their parents to work. And we talked earlier on in our big discussion just now with the Director General about some of these root causes, about the way poverty drives child labour, how families are actually depending on their children's work, either for income or because they may work on a little family farm where basically they can't afford to hire adult labour because the farm doesn't make enough profit, so they rely on the children because otherwise the farm just can't work. I want to turn to you all, but I want to start with Kailash as well. We've talked before about how social protection, how cash transfers to help kids go to school really help. But when you're in a circumstance where the little family enterprise, the little family farm, just needs a pair of hands if it's going to be able to do the work, even if you give money for the kids to go to school, you still need somebody to do the work on the farm. So we need to break this cycle. What are your thoughts We talked earlier on about turning off the tap. We said there are still 5 to 11-year-olds entering child labour, especially in agriculture, especially in unpaid family work. How are we going to break that cycle? Because if we don't, we're not going to reach our goal.
Right, absolutely. But listening to Zulema, it's very clear that whether it is Nepal, a poor country, or United States of America, the problem is more or less same in case of many children, not just one. And when she says her younger sister is America, 9-year-old, America is still toiling in the fields and farm, and the President of United States should listen to America and America's sister who is sitting here. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable. How can you teach to the whole world about human rights when America is in trouble, 9-year-old America? So having said that, let me also tell that this is a myth.
This is a
myth.
A myth.
This is a myth. This is propagated and perpetuated and spread by the vested interest, those who are exploiting children, because children are the cheapest source of labor. In a world where 210 million adults are jobless, Simon, how would you justify 152 million children are working in full-time jobs?
Absolutely.
Why not these jobs are given to the able-bodied adults? That is one. So we have to think in that direction. Secondly, agriculture is no more that agriculture which used to exist 40, 50 years ago. It is extremely hazardous, using pesticides, as Julema has pointed out. It is dangerous, it is mechanized, the electricity is being used, and the largest number of occupational health hazards cases come from agriculture sector.
Absolutely.
And not only that, the killing, the deaths come from agriculture sector. So it is highly dangerous. And commercial. It is commercial because now in this globalized world, many of the big companies found suppliers and production chains in the developing world. The old farmers have become tenants of their own farms. The whole family is working day in and day out to produce wealth for those big companies, big brands, not for themselves. They could be the local brands, they could be the international brands or international companies. So we have to bear in mind that these children are working for someone else, not to work for themselves or for their family. And thirdly, if so many children, 70% of the total child labor workforce is engaged in agriculture, means we are depriving them from education. And you live in a world which is driven by the knowledge economy. You cannot think of a just world, you cannot think of a sustainable world if you allow so many child laborers to deny education or denied education. So education is the key in that sense, and we all know that the largest number of child labor exists in agriculture sector, but also the age group between 5 to 11 is most vulnerable. The girls are most vulnerable. So we have to prioritize these sections, 5 to 11, girls and agriculture work, and the combination of all these. So we have to invest on them. We have to invest on their education to ensure their freedom and safety, not safety at workplace, but safety in life.
I just want to ask, because very often, I'm sure we've all had this experience, because we all go to the field and we talk with children in child labour in the village. And the number of children that say, when you say, what do you want to do? How often do we hear a child saying, I want to stay working in agriculture? It seems to me we also have another big challenge, which is that all these deficits you're talking about in agriculture, whether it's locally traded, whether it's subsistence, whether it's commercial, whether it's not, whether it's global, is that we have a real massive problem if everybody wants to leave the farm and live in the city, because I say to those children, yeah, you know what, the job your parents do is actually the most important job in the world, because if there weren't any farmers, none of the rest of us would have any jobs because nobody have any food to eat. So we really do have this challenge, it seems to me, of transforming agriculture completely to a decent work sector for everybody, where adults and youth have decent work and kids are in school. But not so kids are in school just so they can escape the village, but so that kids are also in school so they can become really, really good farmers.
Yeah, so that is important. But there is also one moral question, that these children have never been responsible for poverty.
Absolutely.
Poverty of their parents and poverty in their country. They were never responsible for the systems which exploit people and particularly children. They are just victims, and we are further victimizing them by giving that kind of lesson that it is their responsibility to help the families. Where is the government? Where are the institutions?
Yeah.
Where is judiciary? Where is corporate? Where is the international community? If these children have to carry the burden on their hands for their parents, then we are all failing these children and failing the society.
Absolutely. And I've got a question actually which leads directly on from there. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is Facebook Live from the 107th International Labour Conference, marking the World Day Against Child Labour and the 20th anniversary of the Global March Against Child Labour. With me are my guests, Kailash Satyarthi, Nobel Peace Laureate, Sulema Lopez from the United States, Basu Rai from Nepal. I'm Simon Stain, Senior Advisor on Fundamental Rights at the ILO. And the question that follows on from your last point, Kailash, is very straightforward. What's the role, Jose asks, what's the role of labour inspectors in preventing child labour? And maybe I could ask both you and Zulema in particular to answer that question. The role of labour inspection service, labour inspectors.
The role of labour inspectors are very important, because when it comes to the enforcement of the existing laws of the land and the international convention and treaties, then the labour inspectors have to play most important role. But first of all, we have to have adequate number of labour inspectors. One. Yeah. Secondly, they should be properly sensitized, they should be properly trained, they should be held accountable also. So combination of all these factors will work. My organization in India has helped in training labour inspectors, and we are still training labour inspectors and senior labour officers, senior police officers, teachers, so officers from the education community. So we are trying to build their capacity, but more importantly, to enhance their interest in their work by way of sensitizing them. So knowledge is important, but the sense of moral responsibility, sense of accountability is equally important. So they have to play important role. But in number of countries, and in India also in some states, I learned that because of the liberalization, their number is squeezing. Governments feel that we don't need labor inspectors anymore because it is creating pressure on the production, on the companies, and that should not happen. Yeah. And this is wrong, absolutely wrong.
No, I mean, I think the ILO's position, that's very clear. Labour inspection is one of the key ways that governments enforce the rule of law in the world of work, and it's absolutely an essential part, and we have conventions to that effect, and they're priority conventions. We want every country in the world to ratify the labour inspection conventions. That's about policy and it's about enforcement. I have another question here from Fernanda, which says, look, these discussions often do take place at the policymakers level, but all of us know, because we've all done it, that the discussions also take place in the village, in the community, in the village monitoring committee, in the local trade union committee, in the cooperatives and so on. It's not just at the policymaker level, but the question that Fernanda asks is, what can a child living in a child labour situation do? It seems to me that puts an awful lot of responsibility on the child, but let me turn the question. How did you two get out of child labour? What was it that made the step that moved you from child labour to education, and both of you in the end 2 degrees?
Sure.
Sulema.
So for me, I started working in the fields at a young age. Like I said before, at 7 years old, it was definitely a journey to take. I traveled a lot for the harvest, following the harvest crop.
It is bit like the grapes of wrath, isn't it? Families still go from state to state following the harvest.
Absolutely, Simon. So my family would actually travel from Texas to Michigan every single summer, and sometimes we'd go to different other states, for instance, North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, etc. My family was always on the hunt for the harvest because that's how we survived. That's how the income came in. That being said, I missed a lot of school. I almost got retained in my 9th grade year. I definitely struggled a lot to keep up with my education. It wasn't anything easy. A lot of the times I would not be in the same course level than other students in other math classes when I would transfer, etc. So this was definitely a really, really hard barrier to get over. But with the help of many mentors and keeping up with my schooling and trying not to drop out, I managed to get out to graduate high school, and I applied at Michigan State University, which I got accepted to, and which I never thought in my dreams that I would ever make.
It is extraordinary. I mean, I think we ought to acknowledge Kailash as the old men here on the panel, you and I, who've been around.
Old, they're friends.
No, I know.
Actually, age does not mean becoming old.
You're quite right.
Simon,
You're quite right. You're quite right. Mark Twain said it very well. Mark Twain said it very well. Age is a question of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. He was quite right. Another great thing that America gave us. But you two guys, in a sense, are exceptional. We have 152 million children still in child labour, half of them not able to go to school, and who are really having difficulties in breaking through this cycle that goes from generation to generation. Now, you succeeded, you managed to get out of it, you worked incredibly hard, you were clearly very driven. Basu, you talked about effectively almost being rescued from the streets of Kathmandu. What happened in your case? Was there just a direct intervention and somebody found you? And
No. I was like, in the conversation, I was also thinking, see, I could rescue it. Somehow somebody picked me from the street of Kathmandu because that time I was unconscious. I had the fever, and then somehow I went unconscious, and then later on I didn't know what happened, and then somebody picked me from there and put me in one NGO clinic, and then once I got conscious, that I come to know that okay, I'm in some place where people are giving me a kind of love, say, oh, it's okay son, so everything will be fine. So the question is here, why some person get rescued? There is only one Kailash Satyarthi in this world. How many children is going to rescue? But why the government and all the people are not making this very mandatory that each and every child should not go to work, and they should be in the school? Are they that poor? Or they don't have that? Even tell me one president or one prime minister in this world whose child goes to work and he can sleep quiet.
Absolutely. Kailash made the point earlier on today that 4.5 days of global military expenditure would fill the education gap and provide the big plug we need to stop this hemorrhaging of children away from school and into child labour. And we've got some questions coming through, two of which are really interrelated. One is, comes to the governments. Can concrete programmes to improve livelihoods for families help break the cycle of poverty and eradicate child labour? That comes from my Rose. And in a sense it comes to your call there, Basu. Do we need a new global march?
I think we need another global march, but this time we need to not sensitize civilians. We have to sensitize the whole government system. So if there is something we need to shake them, make them feel that, make them that empathy to generate. So that has to come, and we need to do again another march, Simon. And of course, to the Kailash Satyarthi, I call uncle anyway, because since childhood only I've been sitting on his lap, and then even I I sat on his shoulder and marching like, stop, stop child labor. No more tools in tiny hand. We want books and we want toys. Yes, all the government need to hear this, and all the like corporates, civil society is already a lot of doing, and all the civil societies, I think, like, the question I have to raise here is like, are we honest enough for the children? Is that the childhood matters for you, for the country, for the government? So
and what's your conclusion? Where do you think we are? I mean, Kailash made the point earlier on, 250 million children in child labour 20 years ago, 150 million now, more or less. Yes, a massive decline of 40% overall.
Yes,
but we still have this huge mountain to climb, and we have 8 years, according to the Sustainable Development Goals, we've only got 8 years to do it. What are we going to have to do in the next 8 years to get to our goal? Let me ask you, we'll ask all three of you. Let me move to Sulaiman.
Sure.
I mean, we need to accelerate progress, don't we? What's the thing that's going to, break through this? I don't know, it's not even a glass ceiling, is
Yeah.
it? What is it that's going to make the difference, that's suddenly going to put the foot on the gas and start us speeding towards our goal? We're not going fast enough
Honestly,
now.
we need something like a march, at least something that is going to be recognized by a lot of people. I mean, I feel like a lot of people right now are hesitant to make any changes. I feel like people are trying not to step on toes. I feel like people aren't recognizing how important the issue is. And even, I mean, I'm not saying we needed like a enormous global march, which would be amazing, and much needed if this continues to not progress. But I feel like at least something noticeable, even just.
Actually, I
Just-
add a little bit more.
Okay,
The thing is, like, see, we need one quality education that we were talking. If you want them to get out of from their from the work, we need quality education. Quality education means not like you have a different kind of school and you are giving the different kind of education. Like we have in the world, like the country I come from and the countries I know, there are lots of school, international school, private school, small school, big school, government school, and nobody wants to go to the government school most of the time. The reason is there is no quality education. The thing is today, if you are going to the school, so after like you graduate, you don't get the job. So I mean, like, of course, so you need a quality education. You cannot teach the children typewriter in this, I mean, like, this technological computer world. I mean,
look, this is key, and we've all agreed on this for a long while, that quality education as a public service is a right for every child, is essential. Private education depends on people's ability to pay, so it's not really the accessible route for people who are so poor their children are in child labour instead of school. I've got a question here from Marimba, and Zulema, I mean, in a sense, you're the example of the question. She asks, child labour is present even in developed countries.
Yes,
and it goes to this question that we were answering before. Is this a question of lack of government's will to eradicate it? Is this lack of will still one of our central challenges?
I
Let me ask
believe
you,
so.
then I'll come to Kailash.
Sure, absolutely. I think the government needs to play more of a role in families and in the agricultural world. I feel like children should not have to be able to. Should not be able to go to work and endure the harsh conditions of being in child labor. I feel like the United States needs to, in my case. For my country, in the United States, they need to regulate more child labor laws. For instance, a 15-year-old can't get a job at a McDonald's until the age of 16, or any other job, but a 12-year-old can actually go out in the fields and work under the worst conditions. It's not fair.
Let me add, Simon, a little bit
Okay,
more
and then I
with
want to
her,
come to
right?
Kailash.
So as you see, like, it's a totally the lack of the government will. Let me give you the example. Today, Simon, you just drive and then break the signal. Immediately, police officer will come and then you will get ticketed. Tell me if one child is working and then all the police people and government will ignore it. So what does it means? Like it means this is totally 100%, 1000% lack of the political will, and all the political people need to come together to end it.
And maybe that's reflected as well, as you were saying earlier, by the lack of resources that go for labour inspection. So the law gets enforced elsewhere, but in the world of work, actually, sometimes it doesn't get enforced very well at all. And that's not because labour inspectors don't want to do their jobs, it's because there aren't enough and they don't have enough resources. I want to bring us nearly to a close here, I think. Kailash, this question of political will, we have an alliance. We've had an alliance for more than 20 years, actually. If you think about the movement against child labour, it's well over a century old and grew up in the social and trade union movement. But our new movement, our new global alliance, which is personified, if you like, in the Global March and its partnership with the ILO, with the trade unions, with the NGOs, with the community-based organisations, we have this new movement. We're still full of life and vigour. We have a new generation of leaders ready to take over the leadership and take us forward to the goal. But maybe we can, I think we're drawing to a close quite soon, and I want you to tell us really your deepest feeling, your immediate, not just the intellectual, but this gut feeling you have about what we need to do about political will to break this logjam and get moving again.
Yeah. So, Simon, we should not stuck up to the deficits. Political will is one question. There is a moral deficit, there is a social deficit, so many things. Because child labor is not just a crime, but it's a social evil. It's a matter of mindset. So we have to change it and we have to struggle hard for that. So that, having said that, let me also tell you that out of 10, 9 children do not work. Only 1. If the world has gone so far to withdraw 9 children from child labor or other kind of exploitation and they are now in schools, why not 1? And I refuse to accept that world does not have that power. World does not have that money. World does not have those institutions and mechanisms and systems and knowledge, more importantly, which cannot eradicate child labor completely, abolish child labor completely. So we have that. But the thing is that we have to prioritize it. Today I said, and I am repeating it again, that 3 things are needed. That they are perceptual, then perhaps the real. One is that this issue is mine. This is personal issue. This issue is urgent. There could be so much explanation about it, but it is urgent. Why it is urgent? We have so many answers. Thirdly, that it is possible. When I talk to politicians, when I talk to other people, they said, oh, it's very complicated, it is not possible. They don't have faith in themselves. They don't have that kind of optimism that it is possible to get 1 child out of exploitation and child labor and bring to school out of 10. So it is possible, that kind of faith we should have. We have to bring the sense of urgency among the governments and the society, and we have to build strong movement to bring that sense of urgency. And we should not wait for others and we should not leave it to others. Every child is my child. I have been working with this kind of conviction for last 40 years that I cannot just leave it to others. If I come to know about the exploitation or slavery or child labor of 1 single child, I feel that is my child. I act immediately. Whatever consequences will be, I never bothered. And that's why I have been attacked several times. I have all my body broken. I lost 2 of my colleagues, and you know all these struggle. But it was because I feel that it is urgent. I feel that I can eradicate child labor, of course, together with the support of all of us. It is possible. So I think we have to change that perception among society as a whole.
Kailash, it seems to me that you're talking partly about the mass movement, a bottom-up democratic movement that says we all own this struggle. It is a moral obligation. It's about the future of our societies and the well-being. And we recognise that we need law and we need states to take responsibility, because with the best will in the world, however much will you and I and the four of us may have, we can't provide education for 152 million. That is the responsibility of governments. It is the responsibility of public services. So you talked about the 1 in 10 children that are still in child labour. Absolutely, that's what it is. Now, 70% of those 1 in 10 are in agriculture, and in Africa, of course, the African region, the figure is 80%. Over 80%. So we still have, there's a disconnect. We have perhaps two sectors overwhelmingly that make up the vast majority, which are agriculture and domestic work.
Yeah.
They're the two largest single sectors, almost certainly. And in many cases, we see them as, well, we don't see them. The world thinks they're invisible. They're in the distant fields. They're behind closed doors. We talked about hardest to reach, and we've talked about the least visible. In this new phase, as we try and push for the end, what are we going to have to do to make sure that those sectors in particular, which may be far away from where the opinions makers live in their comfortable city pads, how do we make sure they're right there, confronting them on the agenda, absolutely clear, so that we do break this logjam, not least in the rural economy, where most child labour is. And I just want to remind people that we're on Facebook Live at the 107th anniversary, 107th International Labour Conference, marking the 20th anniversary of the Global March Against Child Labour, trying to wrap up our conversation about what we really need to do now to get the push, to get the acceleration to our 2025 goal. Kailash.
I tell you that this would be a mockery if we say that, and we keep on saying that, this segment of children is hard to reach. Because of geographical reasons, because of social reasons or cultural reasons, this is all wrong, I would say. We are the people who have already conquered Mars. We are the people who are able to take the close-ups of Pluto, close-up photos. We know that what is happening in Pluto. And we cannot reach out to these children, and we keep on calling them hard to reach. I tell you that we are making mockery of ourselves and no.
So what makes it hard is the lack of
technology. So many satellites are moving around on the Earth, and every day so many satellites are sent to Earth orbits and moon orbits and whatnot. Why can't we see that which are the areas where child labor exists? Simple technology of surveillance, simple technology of biometrics, simple technology of finding the things in schools through our small smartphones. If the smartphone can reach out to those remotest villages, why can't we understand that these are the children who are out of school and working in fields and so it's a question of priority. It's a question of honesty, as Basu pointed out. Are we really honest to our children? Where is our morality? We have globalized everything. We have globalized knowledge, economy, production, supply, consumer items and everything. This is the time to globalize compassion. This is the time to globalize compassion, and Global March was the first experiment I did in my life to globalize human compassion to shape the new world. And I tell you, Simon, that change is knocking your doors. These young people are the change. You are the change. I am the change. We are the change. Change is knocking the door. Nobody can continue with child labor and slavery in the coming future. The youth in America, they were on the streets in millions and said no to gun violence. This is the change, and change is knocking the door. And it is coming through this youth.
Kailash ji, change is coming through us and through the youth that are going to take over the leadership of the global movement. Unfortunately, although I'd like to bring them in now and do another half an hour about the future leadership of youth in our movement, we are going to have to wrap up.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, I think Kailash's call for the globalisation of compassion, if we can globalise everything else, we can globalise political will, globalise compassion, globalise the rule of law, globalise our obligations we have as adults towards the world's children. I can't think really of a better way to close, Kailash, than what you said. Globalise compassion, and we can have a global economy that works for all our children. With your permission, guys, we do have to wrap up, apparently. I just want to remind the audience watching on Facebook Live that this was a Facebook Live broadcast from the Palace of the Nations, the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, from the 107th International Labour Conference. My guests were Kailash Satyarthi, Nobel Peace Laureate for 2014, Zulema Lopez from the United States, Basu Rai from Kathmandu. We're marking the 20th anniversary of the Global March and World Day Against Child Labour. And just remember that we'll be back today at 5 p.m. Geneva time on Facebook Live to talk about 20 years after the adoption of the ILO's Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work with my colleagues Kari Tapiola and Beata Andres. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for your questions. I hope we did our best to answer. Kailash, Zulema, Basu, thank you so much. Many, many thanks for joining me.